Hello,
Good.
everyone. Yeah, to those attendees who just dial in, good morning. It's me again, Carlson, and we are, moving to the next session. This panel is entitled "Healing the World with RegTech." It's going to be moderated by Koen van der Hooydonk, the founder and CEO of The Connector, and of course, the author of RegTech Black Book. So I'll leave it to your power, Koen, to start the discussion. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Carlson. I'm very happy to be here today. It's early in the morning for Europe, so good morning to everyone in Europe, and have a good day as well for all the rest of the world. And thank you for having us today in this panel. And it's a very interesting panel because it's about healing the world with RegTech. If you think about in the name itself, it's a very bold name to have as a panel discussion. So I'm happy to have four of my friends from all over the world globally present in this call. And I'd like to maybe have a quick introduction of themselves. And I may start with Antoine, if you can.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, great pleasure and honor to be part of this panel today. So thanks a lot to you, Koen, Mona, and Carlson for having me, and especially the fact that you're interested in looking at RegTech through a different prism, which is of a different industry, and in my case, that's healthcare. So yeah, Antoine, based out of Paris, France, been working the biotech industry for close to 7 years now. So both in life science instrumentation we did in the academic research field, as well as in tech and software, more recently across the healthcare, pharma, and drug manufacturing sector. Currently, I work in MyCellHub, which is a European software as a service company headquartered in Belgium. And I guess you could call us a RegTech company in a way, because we've developed a platform specifically designed for a therapy provider, so company that provide new and advanced therapies to patients, to help them comply with regulations, keep their data safe, and simplify their operations.
Thank you very much, and happy to have you here, Antoine. Takashi, can you maybe introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Very honored to be here today. My name is Takeshi Kito, and I'm based in Tokyo. And today I am representing FinTech Association of Japan as a vice chairman. And also I'm working for the government of Japan's regulatory sandbox as a committee member. So thank you very much for having me today.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you very much. Next one up, Brent.
I'm also very happy to be here. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of For Gold. And yeah, I have a history as a professional cyclist, but unfortunately I had to stop because I have IBD, Crohn's disease, and during my career I experienced that there was a big gap between where science already was and now the most supplements were developed. And with For Gold we want to close that gap, and we're using DNA. We interpret DNA, to get more out of yourself, to get more insights, and to make better decisions for your health and for your performance.
Thank you. Great for having you as well, Brent. Last but not least, Rick.
Good morning. My name is Rick Koekelbergs. I'm the founder, managing director of the banking scene, a network community for banks and suppliers, the entire banking ecosystem across Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, but with a much broader lens as well. I do that more out of my passion to get my vision on payments and banking a lot sharper. And of course, that also involves a lot of RegTech solutions, which help to automate and improve the way we bank and pay today and tomorrow.
Good. And tomorrow, very important one. Thank you, Rick. I think it's very obvious that with the title of our discussion that I ask my first question to Brent, because somehow healing the world with RegTech, maybe you're the closest to all of us in terms of this title. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you already introduced like a minute ago and how you actually imply tech and rec, and how do you make that combination in For Gold?
Yeah, so we're a bit in preventive healthcare. And our software, it helps people to get more insights to their health and to their performance. An example on that is like, for example, vitamin D. We can give you insights if you're going to sit in the sun, if you're going to get vitamin D through UV light. If it's not, it's kind of necessary that you're taking vitamin D through the air. Another insight is like omega-3. If you can get omega-3 to nuts and seeds, or yeah, if it's not possible, you need to get it through fish or algae. We can get a lot of insights, which makes it possible to be more healthy, and to have that insights, to have that data, which is it's kind of powerful to improve your health. And I focused on nutrition now, but it's also insights in terms of burnout, bore out, sleep, training, if it's good to train fasted, diet, etc.
And how does that fill in with a very regulated environment? Because that's also where you're in. It's the food industry, so that's health and safety. It's a very important element. So you could consider that as a regulation as well, right?
Yeah. So everything around DNA, it's kind of new, and for me, the regulations maybe it may be a bit stronger, maybe a bit more. But we combine our DNA analysis with food supplements, and we can say if you're a responder on certain food supplements as well. Like, for example, creatine. It's one of the most used supplements in the world, but you can be a non-responder on creatine. But in our supplements, it's very regulated, and in terms of transparency, we're already using RegTech, and every people who have bought a supplement from us, they can just enter their batch number on our website, and they can like download their batch document, and like already from that moment they can see what's in the product and what's not.
Cool. Thank you very much, Antoine. That's right up to your alley, right? Is that not quite similar as implementation in terms of tech at My Cell Hub? My Cell Hub.
Yeah, I think it's super similar. And I think Brent and I were both part of an industry that's highly demanding and extremely regulated for the sake of patient safety or taker safety. And I think that's a great thing. But like, what you have to know is it's also a real challenge for younger / innovative companies, especially biotech ones, to organize their activities to keep up with that regulations or to comply, right? So if you take GMP guidelines, for example, so that stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, usually issued by the FDA in the US. Therapy providers, what they've got to do is they need to keep track of absolutely everything that is being done near and far the products that they develop. So a popular industry motto would be, if it's not written, it didn't happen. So imagine now that a vast majority of these companies, what they do, and that includes the big pharmas, by the way, they still document all their processes and operations on paper. So it's not only unfriendly, it's also extremely time consuming. And the real issue is that it leads to errors, right? Because you've got typos, you've got handwriting misinterpretations, and so on. So what we do in My Cell Hub is we believe that tech, and I guess that's why you could call us a RegTech company in a way, can significantly help reduce deviations and errors by promoting regulatory compliance and kind of streamlining bioproduction processes, right? So in the end, what this means is we try to support new therapies and help patients access them more easily and more quickly.
Yeah, when you talked about the paper base, I thought you were giving an example of a bank, Antoine.
Well, I guess
similar. If I had just replaced some words in your sentences, then we would been talking about the banking industry, right?
See, there aren't so many differences, right, in between the industries that we work in. No, for sure. Like as I said, right, they need to document literally everything they do. So who's where doing what with what product at what time, and everything needs to be signed off and approved by different people and supervisor, quality control specialists, and so on. So you can imagine that's a lot of data, right? That's just going around clean rooms and labs, and now imagine these are actually piles of paper, which you've got to move from a place to another and read through and write on and so on. So it's crazy. So if you digitize everything, all of a sudden operations become so much simpler, and this is basically what we're trying to do.
No, interesting. So what I'm hearing is so far is technology is supporting your journeys to provide solutions within the healthcare. I was wondering, Takashi, you as being part of the FinTech Association in Japan, how do you look at this? What is your experience on this?
Yes, fintech and financial industry is strictly regulated industry, of course. So fintech companies and my own company is a financial is as a company, as a fintech startup, and I have to comply with regulations, right? But on the other hand, regulators or governance system also have to comply with the technology. So this is not a one-way approach. So it's a reciprocal relations. So in addition to my activities in the fintech association and industry, I am a member of Japanese government's experts group on agile governance. And we have discussed how to design governance mechanism with high
Mhm.
agility and how to implement this in society. So one example is Legacy Sandbox, of course, and we are working on agile legal reform based on data and evidence obtained from demonstrations. So this kind of agile governance framework also contains a concept of a multi-stakeholder approach, and in which the private sector and the public sector are viewed as equals. So I'm wearing multiple hats, both in the public sector and the private sector. And this kind of public-private collaboration is quite important to comply with both regulations and technologies.
Kun,
Can you hear me?
yep. So I see you're speaking, but we cannot hear you for some reason. And you're not muted though, so maybe just a mic issue. It's funny, Brent, what you said because it really resonates with what we see across the biotech sector. So yeah, food supplements. I mean, it's not far. It's not the same industry, but it's extremely close. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And we know that a lot of pharma companies, they are looking into food supplements as well because COVID accelerated everything around preventive healthcare. So it's it's interesting from one side for us, but also it
Yep.
makes the whole sector a lot more competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. For sure.
Thanks a lot for filling in, Antoine. I'm sorry, but I kind of lost my connection. Don't know why. Strangely enough, but I'm sure you had a further conversation on what Takashi was saying earlier. I kind of like to bring it back a little bit to the topic of healing the world with RegTech, and therefore I would like to have explaining a little bit more because I know you run a large community, and I've been an active participant in that community. And very often you talk about within the community banking for good. It's a very interesting topic, and somehow it also relates in my feeling to the title that we're talking about today. So, could you elaborate a little bit more? What does that stand for, and what are the latest trends that you see within banking for good, if I may say it like this?
Oh, sure. For me, banking for good is a very broad theme and covers everything, every initiative that banks do to improve the lives of their customers, but also society as a whole. Um, and to me, linking that to RegTech, I believe that RegTech provides technology to at least to the bare minimum. But when I talk about banking for good, I
Hmm.
really want to talk about the stretch and making sure that RegTech companies, for example, are not only solving the pure regulatory requirements, but sometimes also there to stretch that to go beyond that. And in that way, RegTech becomes more than simple RegTech because they
Hmm.
are fulfilling a lot more needs than the proper regulatory requirements. So we talk about banking for good, and maybe also I wrote in the RegTech Black Book about how to turn black magic of financial services into the fine art of banking has to
Hmm.
do with that as well. It's about making sure that the tools, the technology, the data that we have as banking industry, that we use that for the better good, and that we also understand what's behind it. And that means that banking for good can go from discussion we had last week on digital inclusion, but also the whole aspect of ethical AI and understanding what's underneath the interpretations of the black box that's currently very often AI. But we need to stretch that and go to understanding what's behind that to make proper decisions and to understand how those decisions are made. That's for me also banking for good, because that's the only way how we can better serve customers and go beyond the simple yes or no answer, for example, in
Hmm.
credit scoring. Um, but on the other hand, it's also a lot about ESG and making sure that we're not just fulfilling the expectations of the regulator, but as a bank, we also dare to create our own identity
Hmm.
and to build on that. And that's where I think RegTech companies can do a lot and help those banks a lot in going beyond the simple regulation. And that is for me banking for good. How to improve the lives of people and society through banking technology, banking services, banking products.
So it's a lot about the role of the bank in the wider world, right? And I think you could call it banking for good, but it could also be industry for good. It's about your moral compass in our
Yeah,
business.
absolutely. That's exactly what it's about. And for me, RegTech is, um, yeah, it's one of the tools to make sure that that compass looks
Hmm.
at the right at the right direction.
Yeah, and talking about the right direction, I liked very much, Takeshi, when you mentioned that you work on agile governance. That's also what you guys wrote in the book. I thought that was extremely refreshing. And for me, it almost sounded like this is the end of RegTech because this is where SubTech comes in. But what is your experience in on the field? Is there like a new type of collaboration between regulator and industry? Is that changing?
Yes, definitely it's changing. And the regulators getting more proactive to collaborate with fintech companies and financial institutions. And yeah, as you mentioned, SupTech is the other side of the coin of LegTech. Uh, so LegTech companies have to collaborate with SupTech solutions and government regulators. So yeah, I have seen this change in Japan as well. And also this kind of collaborations have to be international. So we are very keen to collaborate with international regulators or
Mhm.
central banks to have broader collaboration and ecosystem together.
Interesting. I was wondering, Antoine, Brent, as both being part in the healthcare industry in a wider sense. Is this something you also notice that there is a kind of new way of collaborating between those regulators?
Brent, do you want to tackle this first?
um, no, I don't experience it like that. Yeah, but we're in two different sectors at the moment. Like on one side, we're in the software based DNA sector, and on the other hand, we're in the food and supplement sector. But it's not that in the food sector regulations are very strict, but there is still a big difference in between if it's coming from other continents, different in what's regulated in Europe, what's regulated in the States, what's regulated in Japan, what's regulated in China. You can't scale it on an international level. There are just regulations. Even in Europe, it's not that in Europe we have our shit together and everything in Europe is the same. You have differences in Germany, you have differences in Belgium. So on that hand, it's kind of complex to scale the supplements globally because
Mhm.
we're quite innovative in terms of ingredients. But in software, it's completely different, and for us, it's way easier to scale that. So that's maybe how I look at it.
Cool. What about you, Antoine?
Totally agree. I think same as Brent, I didn't see a change in regulator bodies themselves because regulations are mostly North American or European, and they kind of apply the same way to all biotech companies. What we saw changed though is how people approach compliance, and they kind of trust tech more and more. I mean, we see, for example, incoming requests about our platform is growing month after month, and that is people understand, I think, that there are better ways to deal with data, to deal with regulatory compliance processes than paper, or the old fashioned way. And this is a really good thing. In the biotech slash healthcare industry, I think of all sectors, this is probably where RegTech matters the most. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter in the financial industry, of course, right? But we're talking life and death here, right? So I like the word healing, because the information that this is about in the healthcare industry is super sensitive. So that's from drug production and treatment development all the way to, say, patients' data at hospitals and very confidential health information, right? So the problem with regulation is it requires resources, right? So that can be manpower, that can be money. And as always, that's not a problem for large corporations. They've got their own regulatory compliance departments and teams, right? Like if you think of Sanofi, Pfizer, and so on. But that can be a real heavy burden for like smaller organizations in terms of money and manpower. But if you look at who is developing advanced therapies to treat cancer a different way, or cell and gene therapy, stuff like this, usually these are like smaller biotech. So people that come from the research academic sector, they had a breakthrough and now they want to go clinical. Regulation for these guys is really tough, because they're going through clinical trials. They're being funded for years before even seeing a return on investment. So this is where I think RegTech can make a difference, right? Is less errors means that life-saving treatments can be available more quickly, basically.
Yeah, I think you put that very sharp in terms of priorities, and I like to comment a little bit, because when you mentioned it's there's a different importance here. I get that between life and death. That's it's undeniable. But what people often don't see is that RegTech within the financial industry has also a reason, because we actually fighting crime. And if you think about crime on a larger scale, there's also casualties. And I came across an example the other day where it was mentioned that in a specific country, a lady could not get medicine for her child because the money that was actually supposed to go to healthcare was going to crime. So therefore, it's also our duty on the financial industry to kind of work out and to avoid this type of crime happening. So this becomes anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So to an extent, we very much connected, and that's something that I actually kind of heard a lot in this conversation and liked also a lot. So I was wondering, did you ever see any like overspill, cross fertilization between like a RegTech company within healthcare going to finance, or the other way around?
Personally, I haven't yet, but I think it would be a very interesting case study. And I've got the same feedback and feeling from our discussion today so far, is that, we have a lot in common, more than I thought, basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe for the bankers in the room, have you seen any cross fertilization happening, Takashi and Ulrich?
I haven't seen it, and I'd be surprised if it would happen. Although I would understand as well, because what you see very often with these RegTech companies is that they're very good in a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
So their strength is really niche, and they need a very good understanding of regulations. And regulations in health industry is, of course, completely different than regulations in financial services. And of course, if we stretch it a bit, we can find the similarities, and we talk about the same topics on a high level. But if you really want to make that on a technical or operational level and implement it, it becomes something completely different. So that's, I think, the reason why it's pretty uncommon that you're gonna have overlaps in the context of RegTech companies. Although when you talk about data and data management, GDPR, etc., there probably is some overlap.
Yeah, fair point. I think GDPR privacy has been the glue in this conversation, although not explicitly mentioned. Takashi, what about you? Have you learned something by listening to well, both Antoine and Brent?
Yes, with trend of embedded finance, I see that the barriers between financial sectors and the non-financial sectors are being break down. And recently, many of the non-financial companies are integrating fintech or RegTech solutions such as payment or KYC and Korean. You mentioned that anti-money laundering as well. And let me introduce one example,
Hmm.
one project which is approved in the sandbox in Japan. And this project is utilizing electricity consumption data to check if a vacant house address is not used for spoofing during KYC. So this is a cross-sector experiment by using electricity data and financial data. And this solution so tackled both the Electronic Business Act and the Privacy Protection Act simultaneously to comply with Anti-Money Laundering Act. So this is what we have seen in the Japanese fintech ecosystem.
Well, it's kind of interesting that it's one of the other words that I heard also in both lines of the story was data, and the interoperability of data and how you share data across channels. Is that a right understanding? Did I capture that right out of this conversation, Takeshi? Is that something you also felt?
Yes, data is quite important agenda for I think all of us, all industries. And this is not only on the domestic issues, but it's for all over the world. So as a part of government, I am talking with the Ministry of Economy to create a framework for data-free flow for of course financial industries as well as
Hmm.
other industries. So yeah, this is quite huge topic for us as well.
Hmm. It almost boils back to KYC and digital identity, because I'm just thinking, Brent. I obviously am a huge fan of For Gold. That's one of the reasons you're on the panel. But I I have my DNA out and about on the internet. So is that not something that you sometimes get from your clients as well? Like how safe is this? Can you put this almost like in a wallet? Can you protect this? Is that something you have came across as well?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and a question we get a lot, because yeah, it's your DNA, and people, yes, still look at it very closely, and yeah, it's very important as well, because there were some major issues in the past with some, yeah, other companies who, yeah, sold your genetic data to other companies. But I think, yeah, what we do as a company is we don't save it, we don't, yeah, use the data for another business model, for another hidden business model. But you, as a customer, as a consumer, you're the owner of your genetic data, and we can give you guidelines on how to save it, which is, yeah, for us a really important one. But on the other hand, you have like the partnerships we have with health practitioners, with nutritionists, with mental coaches, with physical coaches, and now we look at, yeah, we the data is growing on our platform, and maybe as a consumer you don't want that your nutritionist can just have a look at all the data. And now we look at some slot that you can write on our software that your nutritionist can only see the data in terms of nutrition, and then your doctor can see a lot of data, and your mental coach can only see the data, which is really interesting for the mental part. And that's also a different part on the data, like you have your raw genetic data file, and then how to save it, like how to prevent that, yeah, it can get in the wrong hands. But on the other hand, you have really like, okay, but it's your raw genetic data. If you don't know anything about genetics, you can't do a lot with it. But with
Mhm.
the data, with yeah, like the insights, yeah, more people can do something with it, and then it's also another discussion on, yeah, we'll have yeah, the insights to all the data. So yeah, it's kind of interesting on how we're evolving on that aspect.
Well, when you're explaining it like this, it reminds me of a the European initiative, which is ongoing today. It's around an identity wallet. And some of the principles that you apply and what you explain is that you would be the owner of your identity and you give bits and pieces away to those that you want. So, in other words, you got full control and you come into a world where, you own your data, but you can also enable some of the things that you want to have enabled, like the therapist, like the doctor, and so on. Rick, is this something that, as you and your community, is this something that has been living in the community as well? Have you had some discussions around the more global discussion on digital identity?
I'm not following those discussions from very close, but I know the whole idea of self-sovereign identity is a discussion that's going on for many, many, many years. It's a lot stronger in the US, where people value their personal freedom a lot more compared to, for example, Belgium. Belgium is quite unique. Everyone has an identity, and it's owned by the government. Almost, or I think about 7 million out of the 11 use on a regular basis their Belgian mobile identity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that are very hard to explain. And I attended the conference 2 weeks ago in London, where they spoke about all the challenges of identity and having a digital identity. Everyone understands the advantages, but very often the discussion falls back to it's not going to be successful because people don't want to give away their identity and it's too sensitive, etc., etc. I think it has a lot to do, or making that successful, like in Belgium, like, for example, in the Nordics, there are a couple of very good initiatives as well, is really a cultural thing. And if you can change that, it's probably a lot easier. On the other hand, the idea of self-sovereign identity remains a very hot topic. I know that Dave Birch, for example, at Money 2020 had a couple of sessions on that yesterday, because and in the context of blockchain, etc., we see a lot of improvements and a lot of developments going on towards that idea of self-sovereign identity, where everyone can manage their own identity. Sounds very interesting, but it still remains to be seen if it's going to be successful and how that will look like. But perhaps Takeshi has some insights from the other side of the world on the whole discussion of identity.
Good one. Takeshi?
Yeah, actually, in the region or in Japan, unlike European region, we don't have a framework for this identity or data transaction in the region. So basically, our discussion is focusing on the domestic issues and trends. But recently, our government says that we have to have interoperability between other regions and continents. So we are currently trying to establish a common framework or interoperability between data and digital identity framework in your region and other regions as well. So yeah, that's the situation in Japan.
Thank you. I think, guys, we figured out our first example where there's cross-fertilization amongst both industries. And, well, I'd like to take us back to the beginning, because our session is about healing the world with RegTech. And, well, thinking back, I'd like to make a quick round, and maybe starting with you, Takeshi. Like, has your viewpoint changed? Are we actually healing the world with RegTech with what we heard today in this conversation?
Yes, of course. We are facing common issues and crisis. It's at COVID-19, and also some kind of geopolitics issue as well. So we have to tackle this issue together, and we need to change with agility. So yes, I changed my mind, or we have to change to comply with this kind of global change. And combat against financial crimes and anti-money laundering. So,
Thank you. What about you, Brent? Have you changed your mind a little bit as being like very focused in the health industry, and probably the banking industry goes as far as having a good relationship with your accountancy and making sure the money and the revenues come in and have a good client customer experience. But on the larger scale, have you changed your mind a little bit with this conversation, and why or why not?
Yeah, I think it's a bit, yeah, the same end goal or something, that we both want to improve the world, and we want to do it on the health part, but on, yeah, the financial part, or the regulation part, there can be a lot of improvements to do to end in a better world. And I think, yeah, that's maybe a bit more clear for me now.
Cool. So shall we all sing "Heal the World" from Michael Jackson? It is a song that we should sing with along with many, right? So what about you, Antoine? You were already a believer. Have you changed your mind, or you even more believer?
You know what? I think it's a fantastic question. I'm fully convinced that what we do has a direct impact on healing people, because it helps them access therapies maybe more quickly, right? By supporting those who develop them. There's just one thing here: is I think the world has become such a complicated slash complex place. I mean, if you look at how people did it 200 years ago, everything was so much simpler, right? Right now, nowadays, we're all like super specialized in something. Tech is everywhere, and if you want to understand a tiny part of the world, it takes, experts and specialists, and even they don't always understand everything. So yes, I think regulation is really key. I think RegTech has a lot of potential, upward potential, um, but it always depends on what the intention is, right? Or whose hands it is in.
Mhm.
Um, and in that sense, yes, I do think regulation is necessary. We just need to make sure that um, it keeps being meaningful for the places it applies to. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mhm. It almost brings me back to the idea of the moral compass, and that's something that was brought to the table by when Rick was talking about banking for good. So that's maybe a nice
Yep.
bridge, Rick, to come to you, because I said I would go around the table and ask everyone's opinion. So how have you changed your mind?
Actually, I did. Initially, I thought it was a bit of a silly title because for me, RegTech, they're more assisting others to heal the world. That was my initial point of view. Now, on the other
Hmm.
hand, when we talk about healing the world, that also implies that things were going wrong before and need to be cured right now. And that's, of course, absolutely valid in this context because things have gone wrong. New regulations came in. Tech companies are facilitating the existing organizations to comply with those regulations to make sure that we don't make those mistakes anymore in the future. So, in that context, RegTech is absolutely healing the world. Um, and yeah, so that would be my takeaway after this reflection. And
Hmm.
I think we can do a lot more. Perhaps we won't be able to heal the entire world with RegTech, but it's definitely going to play a big role. And as I said, it's about a moral compass, and organizations have to define which moral compass they would like to follow or in which direction they would like to go. And then they're going to decide how far to go. And it's really about purpose. Why are they doing what they're doing, and how are they gonna fulfill the expectations from both customers and society? And if they really want to do that in a good and proper way, they need to make sure that the technology behind it supports those ambitions, those aspirations, and that purpose. And that's where RegTech is absolutely needed because they provide the technology for solutions to overcome the problems from yesterday.
And to build a better future for tomorrow, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
On top of that, so it's almost like an enablement. the tech is used to enable regulatory, which we
Mm.
make the common conclusion that compliance and regulations is there for a good reason and
Mm.
a moral compass. So, Rick, we're heading towards the end of our conversation, and I was wondering for
I'm
you.
not gonna sing.
Ah, I really was hoping that you would sing the song "Healing the World" of
I'll
Michael.
leave that to you.
I asked you so many times yesterday evening. No, just kidding. No, I was just wondering, and if there would be like one giveaway that you would say to the audience, like at the very end, what would that be after this conversation? What would you say is the next step in terms of maybe RegTech, in terms of getting involved? What would be your advice to this audience?
uh, to really think of where you can go beyond the traditional RegTech discussions, because that's where true magic happens, according to me. It's easy these days. It's relatively easy with the existing solutions that are in the market to comply with regulation. Question is, how far are you willing to stretch that to do even better in the future?
So it's joining the bigger conversation. That's what you're saying, right?
Not even talking about the conversation, but really about making things happen. Not talking about, but
Okay,
doing.
doing
Yeah.
right. Then we come back to you, Brent, because you actually doing it, right? What would your advice be as participated to this channel, to this panel? What would be your 50 cent?
Yeah, I think if there were any young entrepreneurs or people who want to start, that they need to use their moral compass, but also just start and improve things along the way. I think that would be my advice.
Cool, thank you. That's obviously Antoine and Takashi. So please let me know who wants to go first, because I like to hear from you also. What would be your giveaway to the audience today?
I can go first. I can only speak in terms of the industry I work in, but I would say lots of actors are in the biotech industry to do good things. They want to heal people. They want to make a difference. They want to bring new treatments to patients that crave or need those. They've got one problem, generally speaking, is this industry is extremely risk averse and reluctant to change for good reasons, right? Because again, we're talking very life and death kind of processes and information. But I do think that RegTech can also help them do better, but they need to give it a go, right? That I think it's a bit of a mentality swift or shift that we need to operate from. Being risk averse is a good thing, but keeping open mind and open eyes on technologies that can help you is also a good thing. And it's about finding the right balance between the two.
Did I hear you say like risk averse? But is it like de-risking? Is that the topic?
I don't know whether we need to go to the other extreme, right? And this is difficult in 2022 because we always go from an extreme to another, right? But I'm not saying industry has to change completely, but I do see a lot of RegTech or tech solutions that are existing now that are being developed, and I see on the other end like people who could use them, who are scared or reluctant to give it a go for whatever reasons. And sometimes I think it's a pity because we could move faster, better,
Mhm.
safer if we just gave it a go. Um, so that would be my advice.
Entrepreneurial mindset with Brent and Antoine. Takashi, what about you as part of the association and working closely with the governance?
Yes, as a fintech association, it's focusing on fintech industry, financial industry. And I think RegTech is started from the financial industry as well. But today I got many insights from other industries such as healthcare and biotech. So I'm very keen to discuss with non-financial regulators our next step and what kind of collaboration do we uh, we have, and yeah, discuss how to heal the world in collaborating with non-financial industry and regulators.
I find that a very interesting conclusion, Takeshi, because what if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is you will pick up the discussion that you had today and will continue that conversation, as I mentioned earlier, but then with the regulators to start a bigger type of conversation to see whether there's a, a multidisciplinary impact that we can bring with regulatory technology. And that's great. And maybe on this happy note, this bombshell, if I may say, because definitely keep us posted. It sounds like you have already reserved your ticket for the next big RegTech Summit organized by RegPack, because we all want to hear where this conversation is leading you to. So with this, I would like to thank you all as panelists. You have been amazing and nice insights. It's great to make that link between the healthcare industry and the financial industry. I think we should do this more because I learned a lot today and I like to give back the word to Carlson. So thank you very much and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Goon. That was a wrap. So thank you so much to all the panelists for this very insightful session, and Kun for moderating this one. So as we are now in the third section of the event, and we still have like a few more sessions left. So following this session will be a panel discussion entitled "The Utopia of the Sustainable Future in the Regulatory Space Within and Beyond FSI." So see you there. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.